classes. So really glad to be able to help out and throw a few things in where it's useful and answer any questions. Um, yeah, I've been able to have a really interesting variety of pricing experiences in my product roles before.
Adam, is that a background there? Is that your place?
Definitely a background. I wish it was real.
Where's that?
I think it might be in Hawaii. I don't know.
Okay. Well, mine is definitely in Hawaii. It's from the Princeville Hotel, looking back toward Hanalei Bay in Kauai.
Beautiful.
So we're going to talk through a bunch of different pricing models today. We'll start out with some pricing techniques. So one of the things I want to start off with is what pricing used to be, and still what some of pricing is. Let's see. Are you seeing anything? You see my screen? Okay, there, now you should be seeing my screen. So a couple of old models of pricing that have kind of stuck with us, but there's been a lot of evolution is cost plus margin. This has been very common for physical goods. It costs you $15, you sell it for $30. And if you're selling it through a retail partner, if you're a distributor, you sell it for $30 and they sell it for $45 or $50. So you both have margin. A lot of physical good commerce still exists this way. Services are really where we've seen the most change in terms of pricing. Then there's the good old hourly model, which a lot of services like lawyers and accountants and plumbers and so forth, they bill by the hour. I particularly despise this model because it creates bad incentives for people. Says, okay, I should take 10 times as long because as long as somebody's willing to pay for it, then I will drag this out. A friend of mine has worked with electrical contractors who work for a utility in New Jersey, and it was called PSG&E or PSEG, and the people who worked there called it Park, Sleep, Eat, Go Home. Basically, they had rates for how they would do things, and they would just park and hang out and then go home because they were hourly. They just get their work done early and just sit the hours. So we're going to talk about some of the new pricing models that have evolved and why they've evolved. So one of the things that you have is new data sources. You've got credit scores that you can get pretty much instantly from Equifax and Experian. And what's the other one? I always forget the other one, TransUnion maybe. So you can hit them with social security number, some basic information, and get back a score on that person. You can tie into ad networks, and there have been some offline sources for this as well. Experian also does some, you can provide them contact information and they will give you bios and demos of the people that you're interested in. Adam, do you know more about Experian and their offline data sales? Hold on, why are you muted? Can you unmute yourself, Adam?
There we go. Excellent. So yeah, the credit bureau started in the traditional business that you think of just knowing your credit and payment history. But one of the things that they do very well is just identity management and being able to combine different sources of information on one person. And so they also had natural customers in all of the credit card companies, which were have always been some of the biggest direct mail users. And so they started to build up a really great business around kind of data augmentation, where if a company has a list of names and addresses they'd like to mail, giving them a lot of estimated uh, demographic information about that person, uh, as well as things like address validation and so forth. A lot of it would be not necessarily information about Rakesh personally, but at sort of, say, a street segment level. So it's much finer than a zip code, but a cluster of 20 addresses or so. What is the average demographic information there, which conveniently gets them around a lot of privacy rules, while still getting pretty pretty good ballpark information for things like income and so forth.
And one of the controversies that happened a few years ago, and at the time, Facebook said they were going to get away with this or get away from this. I don't know if they put it back in. Is correlating your Facebook profile with data that they got from Experian. So marrying your online data with offline data. At the time, they said that they were going to stop doing that. I don't know if they've, since the controversy died down, gone back to doing that. So some of the other new reasons pricing has evolved. We've got more complex products. It's more than just the hourly wages or I'm going to sell you physical products. So you've got a lot more data you can work with, but a lot more things that you can sell. You also have a lot of digital goods where basically I can sell you a lot of things without it costing me anything. I put another account in and basically I've got little to no incremental cost. And with digital goods, you also have this concept called windowing, which we'll go into really quickly, just because I find it fascinating. It's primarily used with things like movies and books and music and such. Where you've probably seen the most variation in pricing and most complexity in pricing is in the travel space. You've been dealing with airlines for a long time where prices vary seemingly by the minute. You can buy a ticket today, and whether it's probably not going to be the same price tomorrow. It could be lower, it could be higher. You have a lot of advice given by various people when the optimal time to buy travel is. And generally speaking, there is no optimal time because things go up and down. The exception being that, within 7 days of purchase, airlines tend to go up, but hotels go down. But they go all over the place depending on what the current market is. So one time I was in St. George, Utah. We were going to go to Zion National Park. And this was one of the years that they had the government shutdown and they couldn't fund the national park. So when we got there, all the hotels were empty. And the governor of Utah said, we're going to pay the money for funding the national parks out of the Utah government. Within a couple hours of that announcement, all the hotel rates shot up. So, a day before they tanked, within a few hours they shot up. So that's how responsive to demand pricing is. We also have a lot more powerful computers today to handle all sorts of different pricing. And we're spending a lot more time these days using market segmentation to identify what people are willing to pay. There's a story from probably 10 years ago. So this has been done in some form for quite some time, but more sophisticated now. There's a story from a few years ago where Victoria's Secret was sending out catalogs. They would send out one set of catalogs to men and another set of catalogs to women. And the catalogs that they sent to men had more expensive pricing than the catalogs that they sent to women. So that's been going on for a while, but we're getting much more sophisticated with that now.
And one technique as well, if a company is uncomfortable with showing two different prices in that way, or might have some other constraints on it, is also just changing what you highlight to different people. So in that example, the catalog sent to men could just be featuring the higher priced merchandise rather than any one SKU being priced differently.
Right. There was a case a while back where Travelocity, it was discovered that Mac users were getting higher prices, but to Adam's point, what they did was just show more expensive hotels to Mac users. They were the same prices, but they featured the more expensive hotels because they had the theory that Mac users could afford more expensive hotels. Another way that people do this is, have the same set of prices, but give you different promo codes. So They might find advertising that's targeting women, and they give them a 20% promo code, and they give them a 10% promo code. So you accomplish the same thing, but with different ways. And in some markets, I used to live in Manhattan. All the Banana Republic Gap stores near Times Square, they didn't do any of the 40% off, 30% off, all the stuff you see at Banana Republics everywhere else. Like if you ever pay full price at Banana Republic, you're kind of trying too hard. But at these stores, because they were primarily driven by tourists, they didn't do any discounting.
And this illustrates, also a topic that I know you're going to touch on more later, Rakesh, that, promotions are the only way Banana Republic can differentiate pricing by geography, because in a clothing store, you usually have to put the price on the item. And so therefore, then it ends up needing to essentially be the same price everywhere. But you can vary promotions as opposed to stores where the price is on the shelf, where it's much, much easier to change it by locality.
Another very common way to do promotions is using Google search. So if you're in California, you have to do periodically emissions inspections. And if you go directly to the emission inspection place, they'll charge you $60. But if you do a search on Google for emissions inspections, you'll see coupons that'll get it down to $20, $30. Because they've said, okay, if somebody's coming directly to us, they're stopping by on the way to work or whatever, they can pay full price. But if somebody's actively searching for this product, I'm competing with, 10 other companies, so I'm going to give a lower price. So just some techniques, if not just for pricing, but if you want to get a good deal, go search for it. So windowing, this is just something I want to touch really quickly because I find it fun. So to maximize revenue, what movie studios have done is they've broken up essentially their product into different windows. So if you want to watch it during the theatrical release where you've got the big screen, but you also get to see it first, you're paying in California $20, in other places $10 to see the movie. Then sometime after that, which is usually about 2-3 months, you can buy it online with Vudu or Amazon Prime. And it'll cost you probably $10, $15 for all you can watch. You can start renting it, and then it goes on to the premium networks like HBO and Showtime. The goal of all this is to really maximize as much money as they can for the same set of assets. One thing that's been really interesting to watch lately with COVID-19 is that the movie theaters have been shut down. So the movie studios are saying, okay, we can't put it out in the movie theaters, so we're just going to release it online first, and we're going to charge $20 to view it, which is closer to theatrical price. And it's been a fun tug of war to watch because movie studios say we're going to put this out, and the movie theaters are like, no, you can't get rid of our window. This is terrible for the business long term. And it's just been a arm wrestling match that is still TBD how that will play out. But I do want to go see movies in theaters as soon as we're allowed to again.
Windowing is an interesting illustration too of trying to sell at every point along the demand curve. So usually anytime that you have to have a fixed price, you are of course, leaving a bit of money on the table because there are a lot of people who would have been willing to pay more. So something like windowing allows you to separate, people into different groups who are, place a different value on this item that you're selling, and, be able to charge a higher price to the people who value it more.
So one of the things that has come up a lot, going back to some of the credit scoring that we've talked about, is risk-based pricing, where you try to figure out where the risk is for a specific customer and how you can make them profitable. So it used to be that you would see, if you went for a car loan, you'd see that this term for 24-month loan, it's X price. If it's a 36-month loan, it's Y price, and they would just do a binary evaluation. Are you approved for this or are you not approved for this? Now, increasingly, they will say, okay, give us your social security number, give us your address. and then they go look up your credit score and say, okay, this is the price for you. So the thing that you might see advertised on TV that's 0% or 2.9% always has a disclaimer for well-qualified buyers, which means you've got a very good credit score. But if you don't meet that, they'll give you a different rate. I just went through this process myself where, I got very different rates from different banks, but I couldn't just go to the site. I had to, fill out a long application on each site to get a price. Not so fun, but it can, if you have good credit, can enable you to get a better price than you would have under the old system because you have lower risk to the creditor than other people. And this is also something that's done for credit cards. One of the things that's been going on with COVID-19 lately is that some issuers like Amex have cut back the credit that they will extend to certain people because they're worried that you will pile up debt. In the last go around with the financial crisis, Amex cut my limit from $55,000 to $1,000 for no particular action on my part. Just they looked at the risks of the overall economy and said, we're just not going to extend that much credit. And we're seeing some of this right now where Amex has looked at some of their restaurant customers and said, hey, restaurants are in trouble right now. We don't know if they're going to be able to pay back that money, so we're going to extend them less credit. Companies do the same thing where they'll say, okay, for you, based on your history with us, based on the money you have in the bank, we're willing to extend this much credit to you. Adam, anything else on that?
Yeah, one of the so actually, yeah, when I was working in the credit card industry for a while, I spent a lot of time on actually how you adjust people's credit limits and what's the right credit limit to give up front, and then how do you change that over the life of them as a customer. And one of the things that they're thinking about, in all cases, it's about how do you change someone's behavior as a customer by adjusting the credit limit. And when you see something like a credit limit decrease, in many cases, what that is if somebody has a credit limit of $50,000, but in the past several years, they've never gone above $5,000 or $10,000. To a credit card company, they see that and think, this is a little bit scary to us in that we have this extra $40,000 just sitting there that this person will tap into in case of an emergency. And that emergency is probably a point when they are suddenly much riskier than they used to be. And so if they never go above $5,000, then we can safely cut their credit limit down to $10,000 and not, lead to them reducing their spend at all, and also then limiting our losses in the scenario where they suddenly become much riskier.
Right. And, another thing is that if you show a different risk profile, if you go behind on your other credit cards, they might raise your rate even though you weren't behind on the credit card that you're charging. There's a lot of variability to that pricing.
And the various offers that you'll get during your lifetime as a credit card customer will change based on all of those constant ongoing risk assessments. So every time you get a balance transfer offer or whatever else, it's all, every time the pricing will be different. And yeah, it's something Rakesh and I were talking about before, was that back when credit card customer acquisition was mainly done in direct mail, you could actually differentiate pricing even more on an individual basis. So 15, 20 years ago, it would be, there was no one set credit card product. There might be thousands of individual product configurations that all look the same on the card, but there's no set annual fee or interest rate or anything, and it would be totally based on the individual and all of that information that we can get from Equifax or elsewhere beforehand. Now that most of the acquisition happens over the internet and is often kind of pull rather than push, you do kind of need to have more standard terms visible to everyone.
Right. So for the audience here, probably the one that you're going to most use or most apply to your products is freemium model, which is basically you give some portion of your features for free, and then you charge for upsells to that set of features. A lot of companies adopt this. Google for their G Suite of products. The products that I've used in communicating with you, Zoom, which I'm using right now, SurveyMonkey, MailChimp, they all have different tiers of products. And it used to be you'd have just enterprise offers or just consumer offers. Now that's just kind of blended together. So you have all these companies that I just mentioned. They have a consumer offering that is just designed for people like us. Then they have things that can go to the Macy's and the Walgreens and people who are using it for real businesses versus people who are just playing around. And they have multiple tiers. I've found a way, because I'm trying to do this as cheaply as possible, to use SurveyMonkey and MailChimp at the level that I'm still free. Your surveys that you get from me will not exceed 10 questions, because that's the limit that SurveyMonkey puts on the free offer. It's also as much as I think people want to do. MailChimp, they give me about 2,000 people on the mailing list before I have to pay them. Zoom is the one that I have paid for already, because they limit calls to 40 minutes, which is not enough for me. So it's all about figuring out who will pay and at what price point. And at the other end of the spectrum is the corporate features, which a lot of it's dictated based on volume. A big chunk of it is integration. So if you have corporate specific features like single sign-on, or tying into your employee directory with LDAP, or you want integration with Salesforce, all of those things that make your product much more likely to be used by a business, that's where you charge the big bucks for. And branding is another one, where if you want to get rid of a logo, or if you want to use your own domain name, anything that makes it look like a business, they will typically charge you extra for.
And the real art in freemium is in figuring out what goes behind the paywall and what goes in front of it. That's the really difficult part, and that's really what makes a freemium model work or not work. And one thing I'd encourage you to think about with that is finding a way to ensure that the people in the free tier are able to use what makes your product great. What makes it special and better than others and differentiated. There's a temptation to, well, that's the important thing. That's the thing people should have to pay for. But it's also the thing that gets them hooked. And if that's hidden behind the paywall, they never get the chance to get hooked. And so, making the things that hook people free, and then a lot of these more scaling features, once people become dedicated users of it, become things that are great to have behind the paywall.
And there's another benefit to freemium beyond just direct revenue, is that I may like Zoom or I may like MailChimp, and the next time somebody talks to me about they need an email solution or they need a conferencing solution, then they can, I would be inclined to recommend them. This is a big part of the way Yammer, which was a company got acquired by Microsoft, got big, is that people brought them into their own companies to start chatting, and the companies and their IT people are like, oh, people are using this thing, we got to go look at it. So to Adam's point, having enough value that people actually adopt it at some level can help you with other things down the road.
You guys, you gotta go.
So some examples of freemium, we talked at a high level about these. So Zoom, it's the number of users, how long the calls can be, what the recording features are. SurveyMonkey, they're probably the most aggressive at upselling. If you get a chance, sign up for SurveyMonkey and see all the holes that they put in the product that say, hey, you can do this if you do Y. This plan does X, which is kind of, from a user interface standpoint, kind of ugly, but at the same time, from a user discovery standpoint, kind of nice. So I always kind of do the balance on it. How much do you focus on educating and upselling versus making the product clean and simple? And then MailChimp in email A/B testing is a very big deal. So being able to put out two different emails and say, okay, which of these perform better? And then send that out to the rest of your group. And then there's this one that you have to have a lot of money for. Ideally, you have millions in venture capital funding. How else would you do this, Adam?
Sorry, I had to step away for just a moment.
So if you had, how else can you do winner take all besides like VCs showering money at you?
Yeah, it's all, the theory is always, you can be a monopolist and price really low for a long time and then eventually somehow raise prices. But I can't think of very many good examples that have succeeded in that second step.
Yeah, what we've seen is that the Ubers and the DoorDashes, they keep, in many markets, they're still pricing below cost. You could make an argument that Amazon has done this. That's probably the closest that I can think of that's done this, but on the retail side, their margin is still not all that great. The most profitable part of Amazon is the Amazon Web Services, which falls into the digital group that we've primarily been talking about, because their incremental cost is very small on that versus actually sourcing product, shipping it to you, dealing with all the customer service. But they did throw a lot of money at it, and no doubt they're the primary e-commerce place to go. And the other piece of that is you spend a ton of money on marketing. If you go to your mailbox, you're probably seeing stuff for DoorDash and Grubhub all the time. Uber tends to spend its money more online than TV. But you spend a lot of money getting the customer and hope that at some point you hit break even or make a profit.
Yeah, and if you want to consider this as a model, make sure that you have a business with a very high repeat purchase rate, because if your hope is that you spend a lot of money to acquire customers and then you make it up over time, it really needs to be a business where people come back a lot and over an extended period, so that as you gently raise prices, you keep them. If it's something that people, for instance, this was a very bad strategy if you're Casper mattresses, for instance, because you're not going to get a second purchase from that customer for a long time.
Yeah, probably 5 to 10 years. That's a little hard to do the LTV calculation on. So the next model is ancillary services. So you're hoping to make money selling these people other stuff. So if you look at things like Alexa and the Google devices, basically they sell those things at no margin or negative margin. They just want to get those devices out there so they can make money on searches or data, or in Amazon's case, selling you more stuff. But the devices are just to get a foothold in the door. Insurance products is a very common thing to do here. If you rent a car on the weekend, in some markets, you'll get a car rental for $10 or $20 a day. Then they will try to sell you $40 of insurance products on it. They make basically no money on the car, but the $40 they get you for the cost of the car and protecting your possessions and liability and all that, that's where they make all their money. And another chunk is partner upsells. If you bought a new computer, probably in the last 10 or 15 years, you get spammed with ads for McAfee and other services that have paid the computer company. I still can't figure out how to get rid of the McAfee ad on my new PC that I bought 3 months ago. There's no stop showing me this thing ever. It just shows up. I want to be protected, or I don't want to be protected. There's no shut the hell up. There was a controversy a while back where I think it was Dell would offer you a PC without all that crapware, and they would charge you $50 more per PC if you didn't want that stuff on there, because that's what they estimated they would make on it. That did not go over well. I think they just went back to putting the crapware on it and not offering you the option. Um, so one of the things that we'll talk about toward the end of this presentation is some of the risks that you have to think about when you're getting into creative pricing strategies and creative bundling opportunities. Now, this is a different model for pricing. It's more in the individual space, or at least this is what I use, because I offer my products and my services to various customers, various markets at different prices, and it really comes down to how well can I scale this thing. So I can do classes and webinars like this. I spend probably 20 hours over the course of a month doing it. It's highly scalable. I can have 30 people at once. I can put the video out there, so my time can be amortized in a lot of different ways. So I can afford to do this at free or minimal pricing. I can do industry trends, like I spend a lot of time on payments, and I can just write a report and sell that. I do corporate training programs where I'll go into like an Amazon or Facebook or something like that, and just basically do versions of these sessions, but more personalized and with more extensive Q&A on site. And then I also do custom projects, which are not scalable, but I'll go for a large company and charge them $30,000 a project or more, depending on the project. So we're going to do a couple case studies now. Actually, Adam and I got to know each other through a case study on Twitter that I put out, and we just had a lot of good back and forth on this. So the case study here is you're running a telematics product. Basically OnStar. The hardware is included in the car that at the time it's sold. And normally you sell a subscription for $300 a year. You give it first year for free, and then $300 a year after that. Has a bunch of different features. Directions, emergency assistant. You can send vehicle health reports, which will tell you when you need to go to the dealer. You can also do remote unlock, where if you're locked out of the car, call up the call center and say, I'm locked out, please unlock my car for me, which is a service that, in my mind, is more valuable than the others. It might not be as frequent, but when I need that service, I need that service. So what this is competing with is a locksmith. So you can either call a locksmith, have them come to you and unlock your car, or because the hardware is already in your car, you can say, I want to do a remote unlock. Locksmith will cost you $150. Because somebody has to come to your car, they have to pay that person drives. Their cost, we'll say $75 to provide the service. You have to wait 30 to 90 minutes for the locksmith to show up, versus remote unlock. The cost of handling that call is $3. If you did a mobile app for this, the cost is like a nickel, if that. And you can unlock the car within 10 seconds. So the question I put to people is, what do you charge for this remote unlock capability? Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a hard problem because on the one hand, it's worth more than $150 to people, right? Because it's a lot faster than the locksmith. But on the other hand, people are willing to pay for a person's time. They get really angry about paying to push a button and feeling like it's something that has low cost to provide and being charged a large amount for it. So a lot will depend on your priorities. To what extent do you want to make this a profit center for you versus using it as a way of driving other things that are valuable for you? So at Volvo, for instance, we tried to view this as an opportunity to upsell people to a subscription. You might offer a free unlock, but say, I'm only allowed to do it free once. Can I sign you up so it's all taken care of for next time? And then if you go that path, then you also need to decide, well, what happens when they try the second or third time? Do you stick to your guns and tell them they have to subscribe, or do you just keep giving them the free unlocks? For us, we thought that ensuring the brand loyalty was more valuable, that, they'll feel love for the brand for doing this. But in order to really get that benefit, you do have to price it. This has to be something that, has a dollar value attached to it, that then someone feels like they're getting something valuable for free. And then they're happy about that. Whereas if it's anchored as being free from the beginning, then it's just an expectation, and it doesn't really build loyalty. And if anything, it just causes people to get annoyed about any shortcomings in the service.
So let me walk through a few more scenarios that Adam and I have talked about. So let's say this price that we put in here is $5, which is, the cost plus margin that we've talked about. The cost is $3, so you charge an extra $2 for it. The problem is that, one, people aren't going to value the service, but the other problem is that you charge $300 for the annual service for all the other stuff, and you're telling the user that this service is only worth $5. So you've undercut the value of your $300 service, which you don't want to do. Let's say this number is $200, and to Adam's point, even though this should be more valuable to you as a customer, and if you're somebody who thinks about this stuff for a living and values your time, I would rather have it done instantly and be on my way to the airport than have to wait 30 to 90 minutes for a locksmith who might call me periodically. I may not have no idea where he is, and I'm racing to catch my flight. This actually happened to me. Like, okay, come on, show up, versus I can confirm this and I can, get on my way to the airport. So it, in theory, should be more valuable, but because there's no effort involved, because I don't see the locksmith pulling up and, putting the little thing under my door and, inflating it, whatever, and I know that he has to be paid and he's got value to his time, I view the value of that as greater than the value of remote unlock, which, from a time value of money, we should view it, but that's not how people interpret it. It's a fairness question. Another scenario that you could make here is what Adam said is free plus upsell. The challenge I have with this one goes back to it undercuts the value of your subscription. If the most valuable thing that you have to offer is the unlock, then why would I ever sign up for the $300 subscription if I know I can get it free at any time? So the answer that I usually like to give, but all of these are points of discussion, right? There's also your cost structure. If you're providing the service in-house, then you can literally offer it for free. But if you had to, because you don't have a service in-house, you had to hire a third party and you have to pay the third party for every unlock, then your price structure is different. You have to charge differently. So in this case, what I would probably do is have a $100 one-time, but a credit. So if you say you're getting a discount off the locksmith, you're paying $100 for the one-time unlock, and you say, okay, Mr. Agarwal, I can give it to you for $100 this time, but if you want to sign up for a subscription, which costs $300, we're going to apply that $100 to your subscription. So you're giving them, you're keeping the price, you're keeping the value of your subscription, and you're giving them some sense that they're getting fairness from you, that you're trying to treat them the right way. What are your thoughts on that model, Adam?
Yeah, I think that's a really clever approach to it. And another thing to consider with this too is that there is no one right answer to it. A lot depends on the broader company's business model and your values and how you want to monetize. And that's why the answer, if you are trying to sell $40,000 cars and increase the likelihood this person's going to buy one from you again, is very different than, let's say you're Hertz, and as Hertz, you have some telematics installed in the car, and you can provide this service to someone who's renting the car. In that case, you probably want to charge $200 or more. because, even if someone decides they're never going to rent from Hertz again after that, well, you probably made more money.
Yep. Yeah, there is a question of how much you care about the customer and all of this, all pricing. I've had to deal with Travelocity and Priceline, even when they've made mistakes. They don't care, they don't fix them, and they just like, too bad for you. They don't, well, in Priceline's case, they should know how much I spend because I spent with them all the time, but they don't take a lifetime value view of the customer. So it comes down to your priorities. It also comes down to what kind of product you're selling. So you may have a different type of pricing on your Ford Focus than you do on your Lincoln Navigator, just because people expect different things at different prices. Maybe on your Lincoln Navigator, you bundle 3 years of service into the price of the car, and then after that, you have to pay for it. Whereas on your Focus, you have to pay from the beginning. So another fun case study that I'd like to go through, and Adam's got a lot of expertise on this, is local versus national. It used to be that you would go to the store, there'd be a set of prices, and you'd pay that set of prices or not pay that set of prices. But with Amazon, you've got access, real-time access. You can stand at the Best Buy or the Target and say, how much is Amazon going to charge me for this thing? Or whatever online retailer. Those prices have been more or less put in the same range because of this information. And some retailers have both online and retail presences. But in the real world, prices vary based on location. Like if you go to Walgreens, if you go to Target, there are a lot of different factors. That's a function of real estate costs. If you're in downtown San Francisco, it's going to cost you a lot more to, one, pay for the store, but also pay for the labor in that market where I believe minimum wage is $15 an hour versus in Alabama where it's $7.25 an hour. You also have different rates of shrinkage in different markets where you've got to build that into your price. Where in one market you have a lot of theft, in another market it's very little theft. And then you also look at the competitive landscape. What does it feel like? What does it price like in your market? So when I was in Manhattan, there was a Target that opened up, and their initial price for milk was like $2.25 a gallon, which I hear is very typical in other parts of the world. And then as they got settled in, they said, okay, CVS is charging $5 a gallon, and 7-Eleven's charging $6 a gallon. Why are we charging $2.25 a gallon? And they upped the price to be similar to what other players in the market were charging. What are your thoughts on that, Adam?
Yeah, and generally any place where the price is on the shelf rather than on the item, they're going to be having different prices in different locations. I mean, it's not fair, you can say, but it is profit maximizing, and people rarely notice or care, particularly because the amounts involved are generally small. It might be 30 cents difference or something, but across 8,000 stores, those 30 cents add up. And like we talked about, the promotions may be different as well. And once a company goes down the route of differentiating price in this way, it's extremely expensive to go back from it. To go to one national price when you're already differentiating it in this way, you remove a huge amount of margin, and there's not really any reasonable assumption around lift in sales that will make up for it. It's just too big, and so it becomes an example of the innovator's dilemma. If you started with one national price because of e-commerce and added stores later, you're used to the margins that come with that one price, but being comfortable keeping your margins where they are is a lot easier than being comfortable cutting your margins.
And one of the things that has changed this and has made it more complex, which is where I think Adam was heading, is that a lot of places offer in-store pickup. So you can pick it up at, if you're in San Francisco, one of these 50 Walgreens that are around the city. Now, if you're offering in-store pickup and they have different prices at the different stores, how do you handle that? how do you do inventory lookups? Because you got to know if somebody can pick things up. And what if on the e-commerce side you're offering ship to store? And Adam, you've spent a lot of time on this in the in-store pickup and pickup search or product search. So I want to hand it over to you for that.
Yeah, it's really hard. So if you're used to pricing differently in every store, and if the vast majority of your sales are happening in stores rather than online, which is true for just about every company that started as a store business, what price do you show? Because one of the dynamics of e-commerce is one of the primary reasons why e-commerce tends to be less profitable than store-based retail is because of pricing, because of the hyper-competitive nature of the internet. Just pushes pricing down in a way that just doesn't happen in brick and mortar retail. And so the e-commerce price is always going to be lower than the in-store price. So what do you do based on that? Do you show prices that are in line with what happens in stores, which is great for pre-shopping and gives people a really accurate view of the world, but that also essentially you are giving up any opportunity to build any meaningful e-commerce business because you'll be so uncompetitive. You could, okay, if you want to show, if you do want to have an e-commerce business and have a low price there online, what happens when a customer goes into the store and expects that price? Particularly to take the example of Walgreens, the vast majority of conversions would happen in store rather than online. Far more people were browsing the website to figure out, hey, does Walgreens stock rubber bands or not? I don't know. Or this children's Tylenol I need, which of the 3 Walgreens stores near me should I go to make sure they definitely have it in stock? So the vast majority of visits were to the website were people who were later planning to go buy it in store. What happens when they come into the store and ask for that price that they saw online? Do you show them the store price online? You could, and particularly, what do you do for the items that you don't sell online and you only sell in stores? You probably should show them online so that people know that they can go buy rubber bands at the Walgreens, but what price do you put? Because there is no online price. Some of the options there are to just not show anything, say price available in store. You could.
Customers hate that.
They hate that. They hate that. But they probably would hate the alternatives even more, which are, you show a list of stores nearby and the price for each of those, then they get very upset. And they know when they know that store A is 30 cents more expensive than store B. And another option that can be a good one is a lot of times there'll be like a my store chosen. You'll see that on homedepot.com or wherever else. Often it's geolocated, and you can show the store price for that store. And that's a popular option for a brand like Home Depot or Container Store, where there won't be very many. There will only be, it's pretty clear which store is closest to where you are and which one you'll go to. Whereas Walgreens, there might be 3 or 4 that are close to you or on the way to and from work or your kid's school. So it's messy with no real good choices there. And again, to Rakesh's point, what happens when you do buy online, pick up in store? What price applies? It kind of has to be the e-commerce price, because if somebody bought it online, you can't raise the price at checkout once they switch their fulfillment method. So you kind of have to charge the e-commerce price. But that's one thing that makes companies a little reluctant to offer buy online, pick up in store, or reluctant to promote it. Now with the pandemic, they've all had to embrace it quickly and get it set up. And now it'll just be a cost of doing business forever. But it's a little scary to them, because it just does mean lower margins on an ongoing basis, because most of these sales are probably not incremental sales.
Right. And then, talking a little bit about some of the risks that you have with differential pricing, whether it's e-commerce or in store, is that things leak. If you're selling something for half off to a certain customer base, other people are going to find out about it because you've got forums, you've got customer service, you've got Twitter. One thing that Target did for a while was they had their e-commerce price that they showed on their mobile app, but if you went into the store, you were within a certain proximity of the store, they showed you the store price, which is often higher. So something that was selling for $7.99, you walk in the store, use the same app, and it's $9.99. People are like, what the hell? I just saw it $7.99 a few blocks away, and now you're showing me $9.99. And Target had to apologize for it. And then the way they solved it is they show you the higher price on the store shelf, but if you pull it up in the app, they will show you the lower price. And when you go to checkout, you can say, okay, this was $7.99 on the app, and they'll say, okay, we'll sell it to you for $7.99. They don't change the store price. It's still $9.99 for the next person who goes in. But if you pay attention to the app, you'll get the $7.99 price. So if you're at Target, especially in a high price market like San Francisco or New York, pull up the app, see if you can get a better deal. Consumers get frustrated with this kind of stuff. People have no end to complaints about airline pricing and hotel pricing. Some of this other stuff is still in the early stages, so a lot of customers haven't really gone through that process, or the dollar amounts are so low that it's like, yeah, I'm not going to worry about it if it's 50 cents versus $150 on an airline ticket. And when you get into extreme complexity, your employees don't know what the hell is going on. So they'll try to look up the rules and they'll try to figure out, and they have to explain to the customers in a way that even if it doesn't make sense to the customer, they can kind of, okay, I get it. I don't like it, but I understand. And if you've called an airline or a hotel trying to make changes or trying to add on to your itinerary or anything like that, you've probably dealt with all kinds of pricing rules and logic that really no human being should ever have to deal with.
Yeah. And this is, an advantage for you if you are working for a new business where you have a fresh start. You can, you can make the customer-friendly choice without the trade-offs because you don't have some legacy profits to protect. And that can enable you to do things that can be very hard for an incumbent to match without extreme cost.
Right, especially if you've got a digital version of something that they're doing in the old days. So like if you look at Microsoft Office versus Google Suite, Microsoft would sell people very expensive Exchange servers that they'd have on site. And you had a whole cost associated with those servers, but also getting people up and running, trained to use it. Whereas Google just said, we're going to do this completely differently. And we're going to have a different pricing model because our cost structure allows for it. So if you can do something that is similar to an existing product, but do it in a very different way, you have the opportunity to really have a lot of margin with a lower price point. AWS is another example of that. I've worked in the days when I had to go buy my own hardware and hire my own sysadmins, and what it took me probably $50,000 to get up and running. 15 years ago, you could probably get up and running with $500 on AWS. That's when you can have that kind of difference, then you're golden. But the most important point I want to make here is that you need to understand how your customers buy, and you need to have it make sense. If I were a lawyer and all my customers are charging by the hour or paying by the hour, that's what they're used to, it's going to be really hard for me to go in and say, this is how I want to price it, because that's not what they're used to. This is a little bit different if you get into enterprise sales, where if you're selling to a company that's got 50,000 employees and they're going to use your product heavily, then a lot of those deals are individually negotiated. You might have some more ability to introduce new types of pricing, but even there, that's limited. Like if you're doing an advertising product you pretty much have to sell on a CPM or CPC basis. Trying to do anything else is going to be really hard. It's going to delay the sale because you're going to have to convince them, and they're going to have to convince their bosses that this is something that makes sense when everybody else sells it a different way. Any thoughts to add on that one, Adam?
No, I think you explained it well.
Cool. Okay, repeating my ask from last week, you will get a survey after this. Just want to get your thoughts. I want to, make these sessions as productive as I can for you. If you decide that you don't want to continue this series, just, tell me why. Just drop me a DM. The content was not relevant. You didn't like Adam. Who cannot like Adam? We love Adam. And then you will also get a link to my office hours that you're welcome to sign up for. You can talk about whatever you want, whether it's career advice or some problems that you're walking through. That link will be in the email. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, Redesign Mobile will focus on material related to the class. Case Lobster, which will give you a wider array of things. I've been trying to stay away from politics, but the last few days have gotten me away from that a little bit. Hope to go back to normal times. And if you want to follow Adam, that's Adam's Twitter handle.
Great. Yeah. If there's any way I can help, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to talk.
Great. With that, we're at time. Thank you so much for coming by. Hope you see you in future classes. Adam, thank you for joining us. You added a lot to this conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.